Здравствуйте, this is Roscosmos. Hey, Roscosmos, this wouldn't be Sergey, would it? Da, is this Joe? Yeah, remember me, the guy you almost killed with that damn proton rocket of yours? Well, I did tell you to look out for the shockwave. Well, let me tell you something. I want to thank you because that Nauka or Noika or whatever module the hell it was today, it really made us look good. I mean, you practically crashed it into the ISS, and then the thrusters started firing randomly, pushing it all over the place, and then it turned into kind of a competition as to who was going to run out of propellant first. If we ran out first, the Noika or Nauka or whatever was going to push us out of orbit and kill all of us. Whereas if we ran out of propellant, we got to live. And guess what? We got to live. And you got to look like shit. Even in front of Boeing. I mean, you made Boeing look good. Well, I do sincerely apologize, Tovarish, but in order for us to make Boeing look good, Boeing would have had to have reached the ISS and done a better job docking. And, I'm afraid... No, don't tell me. Don't tell me that it didn't. Not again. I'm afraid not, Tovarish. What does Tovarish mean anyway? Well, in Russian it means comrade. But in general, it's the only thing that we say when you are in trouble. And I assure you, by the time you get back, you are going to be in very big trouble. Very sorry, Tovarish. До свидания. Wait, come back, you god son of a... Good evening, and welcome to yet another episode of the Angry Astronaut. Yes, I am releasing another recorded episode back to back, day after day, and I did not intend to do this, not at all, but things just keep happening, especially with companies that seem to be developing a reputation for doing absolutely nothing right. And you may be wondering why I'm wearing ULA attire, especially the Vulcan, given that the Vulcan has not yet reached orbit. Well, it's because arguably everything that ULA has put into the Vulcan does work, and the only thing that doesn't work are the Blue Origin engines, at least not yet. And then what about these things here? Well, I'm going to make the argument that I am going to make these things work, and I am going to make both of these mugs, the Boeing mug and the Blue Origin mug, fly as a two-stage vessel, utilizing my own unique form of propulsion. You've seen me do this sort of thing before, but this time I'm going to try to take it to the next level. So in any event, the ULA, and the whole reason I'm wearing this, of course, is because they seem to be the only part of the whole Starliner setup that works properly. The Starliner itself still is not functional. At least we caught it this time before it took off, and we wasted another rocket on another pointless test. But nevertheless, after over a year and a half, and keep in mind, the very first serious episode that I made, that is to say, an episode that was about space, had to do with the Starliner and the fact that it had failed to achieve the correct orbit. And I was was criticizing it at the time and the expense of the entire project, how much it was going to be costing per seat, etc. And here we are over 18 months later, and we still are having problems with Starliner. In spite of everything that's been done to correct all of the software problems, in spite of all of the work that NASA and Boeing have put in together to try to make this damn thing functional, and still it is not functional. It is still having problems, and I'm going to get into those problems here in just a couple of moments. But the fact of the matter is, this is completely unacceptable. We need the Starliner as much as I hate to admit it. We really do. We need a second commercial crew vehicle in case something happens to the Crew Dragon. Keep in mind, the Crew Dragon has not really flown that many times. We don't know if some accident may come up in the future. If it does, then it's going to be a tremendous delay before American astronauts can fly from American soil again. And are the Russians going to be so generous the next time and give us access to their Soyuz, which appears to be the only really reliable vehicle that carries human beings into space? I mean, once again, I'm not saying the Crew Dragon isn't reliable. It just hasn't had time to establish that sense of reliability. What the hell is going on? We're talking about the space organization and the country that put human beings on the moon, and yet we seem incapable of going to the ISS. One failure after another, and what's going on right now with the Starliner is completely unacceptable, and really we should have done things completely differently at the time when I started this channel over 18 months ago. What should we have done? Well, I'm going to tell you all about my ideas right now. The most obvious question I have is, why the hell did NASA select the Starliner over the Sierra Nevada Dream Chaser in the first place? Well, at the time, NASA thought that the Dream Chaser was more complex and was more uncertain in terms of the time frame that it would be able to fly astronauts to the ISS. The Dream Chaser spacecraft would take off on top of a ULA Atlas V rocket and land on a runway like a space shuttle. And this type of technology was not as far along in development as the Crew Dragon and the Starliner, at least according to a selection statement signed by Bill Gerstenmaier, who was the head of NASA's Human Exploration and Operations Directorate at the time. Quote, "A winged spacecraft is a more complex design and thus entails more developmental and certification challenges, and therefore may have more technical and schedule risk than expected." And by the way, this was at a time when NASA expected the commercial crew program to be completed by 2017. The need for a backup commercial crew vessel is obvious. We ran into this problem during the space shuttle. When the Columbia and when the Challenger were destroyed, it pretty much brought man's presence in low Earth orbit to a complete standstill unless the Russians provided transportation on their Soyuz. Given the current political situation with Russia, that can hardly be guaranteed anymore. On top of that, the Starliner is capable of doing what's called reboost. In other words, propelling the ISS into the appropriate orbit as it needs to be done from time to time. This is something that the Crew Dragon, and in fact also the Cargo Dragon, are incapable of doing. There are some other vessels that are capable of doing this, but they are non-reusable, and NASA's current strategy is to move towards reusability. But, of course, as we all know, there were many, many problems. The Starliner didn't reach the appropriate orbit. It also didn't have a proper separation from the crew and the service modules, and it also required no less than 80 software corrections over the course of the last 18 months with NASA oversight. All of that has been done in great detail, and yet there have still been problems. Now, in my opinion, this is what should have been done a year and a half ago after so many woeful failures on the part of the Starliner. The Dream Chaser should have been given an opportunity to compete against the Starliner, to create their own human-rated vessel, given the fact that they were moving towards that goal anyway, utilizing their own funds, and given the fact that they are a billionaire-funded company who have quite a lot of money to invest in such things anyway, I think they could have competed with Boeing on this particular issue. And if they had created something that was superior, something that was more reliable, and something capable of going to the ISS first, then by all means, let them and toss the Starliner to the winds. And if the Starliner was able to pull it off, well, at least Sierra Nevada got a chance. Now, I'm not saying that Sierra Nevada should have been given an extra chance or an unfair advantage. I'm simply saying that they should have had an opportunity to right the wrongs that the Starliner had created. However, this is not what happened. What NASA did do, mysteriously, was contract an unmanned Dream Chaser to carry cargo up to the ISS, and also an additional cargo pod called the Shooting Star, which could also be used as a satellite spaceship. It serves quite a few different functions, actually, and it's capable of ISS reboost. So really, this thing can carry cargo, it can carry an additional spacecraft, and in a couple of years it's going to be carrying crew members as well. Essentially what this means is the Dream Chaser is going to make the Starliner completely obsolete. There's going to be nothing the Starliner can do that the Dream Chaser cannot, and many things the Dream Chaser can do that the Starliner can't. For example, land cargoes on runways very gently, especially very sensitive experiments, something that the Dream Chaser certainly cannot do, and even the Crew Dragon can't do. Now, of course, the obvious question is, where would NASA have gotten the funding in order to make a third human-rated system? It wouldn't have been possible, would it? Well, we need to keep one thing in mind. Sierra Nevada was developing the Dream Chaser on their own for the last several years before Boeing's failure in 2019. So a great deal of the money had already been spent. As I said before, 75% of the vessel was already human-rated. So really, it wouldn't have taken a whole lot of money in order to complete it. On top of that, the money saved would have made up for it as well, because even though the Dream Chaser does run off of an expendable rocket, it doesn't require a sea recovery or a land recovery somewhere out in the Nevada desert or something. It lands in a predictable location. You can take the cargo straight off quite easily. It's essentially like landing an aircraft and disembarking and taking off the cargo from any type of small aircraft. Very, very different from a capsule. A lot less expensive, and so therefore the whole project probably would not have cost a whole lot more money if we had started it in 2019. So what now? Well, hours before launch on Tuesday, Boeing announced that the Starliner team had discovered what's called, quote, unexpected valve position indications, unquote, in the propulsion system. Fortunately, this does not appear to be any sort of software issue, a problem that has plagued Starliner from the beginning, but if it has problems in the propulsion system as well, who knows how many other issues it might have. However, some inclement weather had passed through the area at the time, so perhaps this whole thing is just a coincidence, and this damage to the valve positions was something that was just caused by high winds or a lightning strike or something along those lines. But it does seem to be quite the coincidence with a ship that just seems to have far more problems than it has advantages. So here's my opinion for what it's worth. Given all the problems that this thing has had, the Starliner should carry out not one, but 2 unmanned launches to make sure that everything is fixed. This is an unusual procedure, but given everything that's happened up to this point, I think it's more than justified. And if Starliner fails again, then Dream Chaser needs to be put into the mix, regardless of how long it takes, regardless of how long Crew Dragon needs to tow the boat by itself, because that would be a far better alternative than risking the lives of future astronauts on a vessel that is proven less than reliable. Yeah, that's going to cost extra money. Yeah, that's going to cost extra time. But as far as I'm concerned, human life is worth more than all of those things. Now look, as you might imagine, this is another topic that I am getting sick of talking about. I was ready, and I'm being honest about this, to cover the launch of the Starliner up to the ISS, to say that it was going to be an expensive solution, not a very practical one for the future, but at least it was done, and it was something that we needed, especially in terms of a backup and also something that could do reboost to the ISS, something that is absolutely vital to the future of the station, one that perhaps is going to stay functional for at least another 5 years, perhaps longer. So yeah, this is something that we really needed, and perhaps a year and a half ago, if I had the opportunity to make the same decision, I might not have wanted to take the chance on the Dream Chaser. And you know what? I would have been wrong. Dead wrong. Because the Dream Chaser at this stage, using their own money, by the way, have managed to create a ship that is 75% human certified. They intend to make this into a people carrier, a vessel to transport people into near-Earth orbit and in order to service their own space station, the Sierra Nevada space station that I have talked about a number of times. So really, had we started on the process of making this into a human-rated vessel a year and a half ago, I think we would be extremely close to completing the process. And as far as the money is concerned that we would have had to spend to do that, I think we would have made that up in terms of the cost per seat of taking astronauts up to the ISS. Because even though the Dream Chaser is probably going to be more expensive because it uses an expendable rocket, nevertheless, it is going to be something that also will be able to land on runways rather than recovery at sea. Sea recoveries are substantially more expensive. So in my opinion, it's going to be substantially less expensive than Starliner anyway. Probably not as cheap as the Crew Dragon, but nevertheless, it's going to have a number of other advantages that I've already talked about. This is the direction that we should have gone from the beginning a year and a half ago when so many problems were discovered with the Starliner. But unfortunately, we didn't go in this direction. Boeing simply has too much power, too many lobbyists, and simply too much influence in the U.S. government in order to sabotage a contract like this, no matter how many times they screw up. And guess what? They have screwed up again, and who knows how long this is going to last. And frankly, at this stage, I'm beginning to believe that this ship is not safe and that it may not go through too many launches before, tragically, we are going to start losing astronauts. And when that happens, we will have no choice but to switch to the Dream Chaser. Why wait for such an eventuality? Now, obviously, I don't have a great deal of proof as far as that's concerned, but given how many problems there have been already with this system, in spite of all of our efforts to fix it, I think that there's a pretty decent chance that something else may go wrong at the wrong time and lives may be lost. In my opinion, this is a chance that we dare not take. If you like the way I put things, if you like how I take on big organizations like Blue Origin and Boeing, and if you want to see this stack launch, well, as far as I can get it anyway, please subscribe, please like. As soon as I get to 90,000 subscribers, this thing is going to fly. And also, there are many ways to support me. It's all in the description. So until Starliner finally comes through, or until NASA finally realizes that they just were sold a lemon by the Boeing Corporation and they need to go with something else. And incidentally, until we also have some reassurance that another Boeing product, the SLS, is going to be reliable as well. So much relies on this company. And until they finally come through and redeem themselves, I urge all of you to stay angry about space.